What's up, tribe? Nick here in Ottawa, and in this video I want to share with you some information about the connection between sitting and low back pain. Okay, so this is part 2 of a 3-part awareness series on low back pain, aimed to help you understand what causes low back pain, how you can get rid of it, and how you can prevent it. Okay, so today's going to be focused on talking about how overdosing and spending a lot of time sitting in chairs can affect your risk of developing or continuing to suffer from low back pain. I think a good place to start is that sitting in chairs it's not the true problem. The true problem is excessive amounts of time spent in a fixed position, right? Being sedentary, lack of movement. The chair position just happens to be especially nasty because of the position that it puts your hip in for long periods of time, namely in flexion and neutral rotation. So this for long periods of time can have nasty effects at the low back, and I'll explain that. But sitting in and of itself, even sitting in a chair, is kind of like salt, right? You put a bit of salt on your food, that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you eat a pound of salt, you're dead. And so there's nothing wrong with sitting in a chair sometimes. You don't have to feel guilty every time you sit in a chair, but if you sit in a chair all day, every day, for prolonged periods of time, it can give you some serious problems. One of which we see very commonly associated with that is chronic low back pain or chronic low back strains, where people get these periods of time where a week they're out of commission because they threw their back out or they pulled their back. But really what it is this problem that's been brewing there for a while based on their behaviors, their movement behaviors during the day. And one of the chief reasons that sitting in a chair for long periods of time can negatively affect your low back is because of what it does to the hip. So like I said, this is the chair sitting position. We are in flexion and neutral rotation. Okay, so a couple things happen there, and a big principle to remember is the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand. Whatever position you put your body in, most frequently, your body adapts to that position. So based on that, if I'm here for long periods of time, my body gets really good at being in neutral rotation. It sucks at external rotation and internal rotation because I'm not using it. So the body thinks, well, if this human's not using those positions, I don't really need to make them available because we don't need them. And then with flexion, all of these hip flexors, right, not just the deep ones, but the quad, TFL, anything that crosses the hip gets tight. And if you want to do a little experiment, bend forward about 30 degrees, grab a little chunk of meat at the front of your hips, okay, and then try and stand up straight. And you feel just this tight clamp-like tension there. And one way to alleviate that is to arch your back, so to tilt your pelvis forward. And so what happens is if we sit like this for 10 hours and we get up, oftentimes if we haven't done something specifically to relieve that clamp, we're walking around with our pelvis tilted forward. And that does a couple things. When your pelvis is tilted forward, it's a lot harder to use your glutes. It compresses the joints of the low back of the lumbar spine, puts all the muscles of the low back in a shortened position. And essentially what happens is, to walk, you need to be able to extend your hip. If I can't extend my hip because all these muscles here are stuck, then I'm just going to extend my back instead of my hip. And repeated extension in the lumbar spine is not very friendly to the low back and contributes to this kind of constant irritation that can play into low back pain. With rotation, when I move, like for example with sports, with golf, I need to rotate. When I move and walk, I need to be able to rotate. If I can't rotate at my hip, I'm going to steal that rotation from the low back. Okay, another factor that plays into it is when we're sitting down, we're typically at a computer, we're fixed in this one position, and our upper backs get very, very tight. Okay, something called a kyphosis, where you can develop almost this like Quasimodo hunched over position. If the upper back gets tight, same thing. We can't rotate, we can't extend, all that motion gets forced to the low back. Okay, so prolonged periods of time sitting in chairs can seriously negatively affect your back. And so weaning away the time spent in the sitting position, in the chair sitting position, is a really powerful way to get rid of low back pain and also prevent it from ever developing again. And we're going to have a bunch of videos, a bunch of tools videos that talk about how to take away chair time from your life and how to essentially implement different positions instead of the chair position in its replacement. Anyway, I hope that helps give you a bigger understanding of how sitting in chairs affects low back pain, and we'll catch you in part 3 of this video that talks about spinal positioning and the role of imaging in low back pain. Thanks for listening.